Messerschmitt provided Germany with the Me-109, a trim, all-metal monoplane that would become the most famous and deadly of Germany's combat aircraft. In 1935, with his aircraft industry in place, Hitler declared that the terms of the Versailles Treaty were no longer valid. He presented his German Air Force to the world and introduced a frightening new term to the world's vocabulary: the Blitzkrieg. Charles Lindbergh toured Hitler's air factories in 1935. President Roosevelt received chilling news of his findings. Germany now has the means of destroying London, Paris, and Prague if she wishes to do so. Japan as well was becoming a larger threat. Following the philosophy of imperialism, Japan saw its recovery from the economic depression of the 1920s possible only through expansion of its territories. The Japanese knew that the combination of airplanes and carriers could vastly expand their influence in the Pacific. Reeling from corruption in their government, the Japanese people looked to the military to bring about the expansion they craved. The Japanese Navy demanded a fast fighter that could take off from a carrier. By 1936, the Mitsubishi factory gave them what they needed, the Type 96. 4 years later, it evolved into an aircraft whose name the world would come to know all too well: the Zero. While the Japanese army seized most of Manchuria and their navy attacked Shanghai, planes took off from carriers to strafe and bomb Chinese troops. Billy Mitchel had long predicted an aerial attack from Japan on American territory. As early as 1924, Mitchel had submitted a report to the War Department of President Coolidge. The growing air power of Japan will be the decisive element in the mastery of the Pacific. Even more prophetically, he continued, air operations for the destruction of Pearl Harbor will be undertaken, and the Philippines will be attacked in a similar manner. "14 years later, President Franklin Roosevelt saw the writing on the wall, putting in motion the creation of a much expanded Air Force. General Hap Arnold, the newly appointed chief of the Air Corps, was ecstatic. The president came straight out for air power, airplanes, now, and lots of them. Aircraft factories geared up, and blueprints for fighters became reality. General George Marshall insisted again and again that planes without trained flyers were useless. The first planes in any airman's life would be the BT-14, basic trainer, and the advanced trainer, the AT-6. As one flyer described the AT-6, it was a huge, all-metal creation with a tremendous 600 horsepower engine glistening darkly under an enormous cowl. It was put together like a brick outhouse. "6 months from today, half of you fighter chaps will be dead. Learn to eat, sleep, and breathe fighter flying. Follow exactly the instructions you are given, and you'll not only survive, you may get a jerry or two in the bargain." A young American in the Canadian Air Force wrote, "When I flew the Howling Monster alone for the first time, to be honest, I hung on tight while it took me for a wild ride through the sky." For this World War II combat pilot, the adventure was bittersweet. It's at once the wondrous vehicle that unlocked a new world, this mud-spattered heap of yellow aluminum that snuffed out the life of a luckless friend. This is the way we remember it. Canadian version of the AT-6 was designated the Harvard. Here with the Harvard is former test pilot and director of the Santa Monica Museum of Flying, Don Madonna.
This magnificent machine is the Harvard Mark VI. It's a Canadian airplane built very much and patterned after the U.S. Air Force. T-6 was a primary pilot training airplane, and it was designed to give a lot of horsepower to the pilots that were going to be transitioning to the P-38 or the P-51 or the fighters of World War II. It also was big enough and heavy enough that a lot of the control forces that were required for familiarization and just teaching people basic flying skills with the tail dragging airplane. If you can fly a T-6, you can fly any airplane that there is. That was the adage, and a lot of people learned that the hard way. A lot of people did a lot of ground loops in this airplane. Canadians under contract built a total of 655 of these airplanes up in Canada. There were 20,000 T-6s. The T-6 is the Air Force version, the SNJ is the Navy version, and the Harvard is the Canadian version of this same airplane. Engines are a little bit different. This is powered by a Pratt & Whitney 1340. It's a magnificent machine, flies beautifully, and a lot of people went through primary pilot training in this airplane. It's heavy and durable, and you have to fly all three axes all the time you're flying it, and for that reason, it's a very good basic trainer to teach people the fundamentals of how to fly, from aerobatics to dive bombing to fundamental formation and all the things that the pilots that were going to be going into combat needed to have for a basis and a baseline for their fundamental flying characteristics. It's a great airplane. It flies well. Control forces are not easy, but they're not hard either. You just have to fly it all the way, all the time. It's big, and it's powerful, and it's solid, and it's agile for as big as it is. The wing is a great big wing area, and you can feel that wing when you're flying. It's very rigid and firm. It's a good airplane. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed flying it.
Air-power technology of the Great War both dazzled and terrified the world. It created an elite breed of flyers. Asking them to go home in 1918 and forget what they knew was impossible. One such flyer was America's commander of air combat in the war, Billy Mitchell. A staunch advocate of air power, he pleaded for the chance to prove that bombing from the air was the war of the future. Mitchell swore that airplanes could sink any ship afloat. Secretary of the Navy Daniels exploded. Good God, this man should be writing dime novels. In 1921, the Navy reluctantly accepted Mitchell's challenge, the 27,000-ton German battleship Ostfriesland, as a bombing target. An international gallery of politicians, press, and military watched while the battleship took hit after hit. "21 minutes later, Mitchel's mission was complete. Naval officers wept openly as the bow of the great ship slipped under the water. An epoch had passed, and the world's navies would never be the same. Prime Minister Lloyd George had declared a moratorium on war preparations. But the new Minister for War and Air, Winston Churchill, insisted the RAF keep the flame of air power alive. In crowd-pleasing displays of flying, the RAF showed off the small advances in aircraft design. Handsomely crafted and proudly displayed, the Hawker Hart bomber and the Hawker Fury were symbols of fixed thinking about biplanes, that maneuverability was more important than speed. British and American designers could not compete with the astonishing advances made by German planes. As soon as they saw the fast, sleek monoplanes, they knew the biplane must fade into history. Stung by a humiliating defeat in 1918, German flyers not only refused to forget, some wanted revenge. "25-year-old Captain Hermann Goering and his fellow Army pilots continued to hone their skills building and flying the one type of aircraft that was not restricted by the Versailles Treaty: gliders." Hermann Steiner, a former bomber pilot, stated, "This passion for flying grew stronger and stronger during the dark years of revolution, when life became all but hopeless and without point for the German people. Flying became the very meaning for life." The P-40 was a compromise. It wasn't as light as the British Spitfire, nor as fast as the Zero, but it was sturdy and it was maneuverable. It had twice the range of most other fighters. By the time war started in Europe, it was ahead of the pack in two other areas. Unlike more advanced fighters still on the American drawing boards, the P-40 was already in production, and it had a low price tag. Orders flooded in from France, Britain, and the Soviet Union to take on the German Luftwaffe. Sadly for France, deliveries came too late. Their P-40s were diverted to Britain to be known as Tomahawks. General Claire Chennault, serving as advisor to Chiang Kai-shek's Chinese Air Force, requested American bombers that would burn out the industrial heart of the Japanese Empire. He got P-40s. When long-range bombers were in short supply, the distances to be covered not so great. The P-40 filled the breach. The Flying Tigers used the P-40s to fight off the relentless attacks of the Japanese. Whether as the Tomahawk, or Kitty Hawk, or War Hawk, the P-40 lasted the duration of the war, serving in the air forces of the Soviet Union, Turkey, Canada, Free France, China, Australia, New Zealand, as well as Britain and the United States. The Planes of Fame Museum in California has a flying P-40N. This was the last major production model of this historic aircraft. World War II pilots who had trained in the T-6 and Harvard found it a big transition to the P-40. With nearly twice the horsepower and a much larger propeller, novice pilots on their maiden flights in a P-40 knew in no uncertain terms that they had entered the world of high-performance fighter aircraft. This particular aircraft was first used in the Canadian Air Force. It is credited for shooting down a Japanese fire balloon. These were balloons carrying explosives which were released by the Japanese into the jet stream, hoping they would land and explode somewhere on the North American continent. After the war, she was used for high-altitude cloud seeding until a landing accident in 1960. The Planes of Fame Museum restored her to flying condition in 1980. The P-40 lacked some of the refinements of later World War II fighters. She was among the last fighter aircraft with non-boosted cable connections to the ailerons and rudder. Since cables ran directly from the pilot to these control surfaces, she felt heavy on the stick at high speeds. But otherwise, she was very responsive. P-40 pilots found her a smooth flying aircraft. The P-40 wasn't the fastest World War II fighter, but she was durable and easy to fly. She had few structural problems and could absorb a fair amount of punishment. Perhaps her greatest asset was her maneuverability. World War II combat pilots in the European theater found that they could outturn faster German fighters like the Me-109. Ability was the fighting edge of the P-40. It had one of the best roll rates of World War II fighters. This later model P-40N featured a number of changes designed to reduce weight and increase performance. Radiators were constructed of aluminum, oil systems were improved, electrical systems and instrumentation were modified, metal ailerons were added, and a variety of Allison engines were installed over the course of production.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification icon for the latest videos as they are released. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next one. Ciao for now.